VC money is pouring into MSPs, AI-powered roll-ups are reshaping the channel, and nobody's quite sure if we're in a bubble or a revolution. Today, Rich Freeman joins me to cut through the hype, break down what's really changing behind the scenes, and what MSP leaders should actually be paying attention to right now. It's Wednesday, December 3rd, 2025, and I'm Dave Sobel. Welcome to the Business of Tech Lounge, the live version of the Business of Tech podcast. I welcome questions and comments throughout the show, so please make sure to submit them in chat. If you have a question, we will happily respond to it. Now, thanks to ABC Solutions, a Business of Tech Plus supporting vendor, ABC Solutions specializes exclusively in accounting, supporting managed service providers and IT firms. Check them out at abcsolvesit.com. Our live stream support is provided by Rhythms, delivering 5G connectivity solutions for MSPs, reliable internet access for everyone. Visit rythmz.com for more information. A reminder, I am watching that chat. We're taking questions, and thanks to our new member, C.A. Gomez12, who just joined on YouTube. Really appreciate you joining me today and joining the channel. Rich Freeman is a seasoned journalist and channel analyst specializing in the small and medium-sized business technology sector. He's a founder and executive editor of Channelholic, an online publication delivering news, insights, and analysis for MSPs and the SMB channel, and a longtime friend of the show and frequent flyer. Rich, welcome back.
Well, hey, Dave. Happy holidays.
To you, too. Had a nice Thanksgiving. Ready to talk some channel as we round out the year?
I just recently finished digesting, so I'm ready to go.
Well, it takes that long for us to get here. But the funny thing is I'll use the digesting point. When we were prepping and talking topics, you gave me some really juicy ones for today. So I was really excited to have you on. And I think the first thing I want to set the ground rule for is a little bit in that you have been covering some of venture capital's continued and newfound interest in the managed services space. There's a lot of money. In 2025, deal volume and disclosed value have surged, with Q3 2025 alone seeing a 17% increase in transactions and $2.6 billion in deal value, including some large ticket ones. Rich, what do you think has changed? Like, what is the last 12 to 18 months that have made MSPs attractive to VC? You've been covering this a lot.
Well, it's the predictable but true answer, AI, right? I mean, venture capital is not new to the world of managed services. Now, I mean, in terms of private capital, we're much more used to talking about private equity than venture capital. But a lot of the vendors that folks in the audience here are familiar with and maybe are using were funded when they were in startup phase by venture capital. So that's not so new. But what's going on now is a much deeper, a greater interest in, and therefore investment in businesses that target MSPs. And this is because of AI. I'll just run through some numbers here. So, global AI spending, it's going to be $1.5 trillion this year, according to Gartner. It's going to be $2 trillion next year. So no big surprise there. Huge kind of honeypot. AI native vendors get to $100 million in ARR significantly faster than other SaaS vendors. So venture capital has been investing in SaaS vendors in a big way for a long time, but they're seeing much faster growth from the AI native companies right now, which is why you're seeing those companies sell when a venture capital firm exits. Right now, according to CIBC, which is a commercial bank, when an AI native startup trades or sells right now, they're getting on average 10 to 12 times next 12-month revenue versus 5x for an ordinary SaaS vendor. So that's obviously going to get the attention of venture capital firms, which is why between 2023 and today, venture capital has put something like $440 billion into AI and machine learning companies, again, according to CIBC. So that's why AI has everybody in venture capital hot and bothered. On top of that, though, we know, according to Omdia, MSPs revenue for MSPs will be about $595 billion this year, on its way to $950 billion by 2030. So it's a big market now. It's growing very, very rapidly. And this is kind of huge, Dave, according to IDC, and this is based on research that I believe they did for Microsoft, Next year, for the first time ever, collectively, SMBs worldwide will actually spend more on IT than enterprises will. So SMB IT spend for the first time ever will exceed enterprise IT spend in 2026. And where do SMBs get their IT services from if not MSPs, right? And so you put all that together and you can kind of see how a venture capital firm would think AI native startups targeting MSPs are a good place for us to be putting our money.
I'm definitely going to keep that stat in mind. Particularly, I had lunch with a friend in the government and large enterprise space, and they're always talking about how important their work is. Hey, there's more in SMB finally. Like we're actually a bigger portion of that. As somebody who's been thinking about this a lot, you've been tracking, now we're tracking the VC side of this. Is there a difference in perspective or reporting or conversations on the VC side versus that traditional private equity, like in terms of the expectations or speed or risk appetite? Are you framing it and thinking about the difference from VC to private equity?
Well, I mean, the biggest difference. So there are probably a lot of folks in the audience right now. I'm just guessing who are not giant fans of private equity because private equity just buys the whole business,
Right.
and they will spend a few years kind of applying their magic dust and preparing it for an exit. And some of the changes that they make, in some cases, change the products and the company and the culture in ways that MSPs don't like. Venture capital, they'll invest smaller, they'll buy a piece, a percentage, but not the whole business of a much wider array of companies, a bigger number of companies. And the hope is obviously to get them from startup phase, seed, pre-seed, whatever, to a growth stage where they can exit and sell to a private equity firm or a strategic or something like that. So it's a different set of incentives, where mostly what they're trying to do is see if they can actually help this company that they think has potential realize that potential as quickly as possible, as opposed to prep this company to be some kind of investment vehicle.
Gotcha. And I think that that's an important distinction. And by the way, for listeners, again, we are glossing over significant complexity in the different kinds of private equity. I think we're both aligned that, like, hey, we know MSPs are not a fan of that. There is a lot of different kinds of private equity out there. There's, family investment firms all the way up to large, global, massive funds of it with different, what's called a financial thesis of the way they're doing that. Rich, one of the things that I was kind of interested in asking you about, again, as somebody who's been talking to this, how much appetite is there on the MSP side for kind of traditional growth funding? If we're thinking, if you're an MSP or used to being an entrepreneur, you can go to the bank and get a loan to do expansion efforts rather than take outside money. Are you hearing conversations about that kind of traditional approach to expansion for MSPs?
So we're moving from the vendor conversation a little bit to the MSP conversation right now.
Right.
We're seeing some things happen in the industry where venture capital and managed service providers are sort of colliding. There's an intersection between those two trends. Now, I mean, beyond that, there's still a massive amount of private equity money out there that is buying up and rolling up MSPs right now. That's a trend that we've seen going on for years. It is ongoing, tons of capital out there, tons of demand by private equity investors for high quality MSPs. On the MSP side of things, I am not necessarily seeing them interested in particular in venture capital as a growth engine, particularly because there isn't a lot of that. You're not seeing like tons and tons of venture funded roll ups. Right now, what you're seeing, though, and this is a hugely interesting, recent, buzz generating trend, is we are starting to see venture capital firms launch roll ups of their own. Where basically they're kind of looking at all those numbers that I was just running through before, and sort of saying, well, what if we take our like Silicon Valley grade AI expertise and roll that together with a bunch of high quality MSPs? Can we realize, instead of selling the software to and through MSPs, what if we own the MSPs and roll them up can we collect some of that upside that we see being generated by the massive adoption and spending on AI, and then the increasing spending on IT by SMBs and MSPs capturing a big hunk of that spending. So we're seeing, there is Thrive Holdings, which is part of or connected to Thrive Capital, a big venture capital firm headquartered in New York. They've created a roll-up called Shield Technology Partners that a lot of people may have heard about by now. I wrote a post about Shield a couple of months or so back. It's probably the most read Channelholic post of the year, just in terms of page views. So a lot of interest in what's going on over there. On the West Coast, General Catalyst, which is a huge venture capital firm, something like $40 billion of assets under management, they've created a very similar company called Titan, similar sort of thing. General Catalyst has something like $71 million invested in Titan. These are not small investments, basically. And the thesis is we take an MSP that has a loyal, high quality local customer base. So a company that is good at establishing and maintaining customer relationships, but isn't super efficient. And in fact, one of the things that the folks at Titan do specifically when they're evaluating a potential acquisition is they'll get deep into the PSA and look at the ticket data and so on. And what they are hoping to find, counterintuitively, is a lot of inefficiency, because the idea is if you take a company that's good with customers and then you take this Silicon Valley grade AI and apply it to some of those automatable operational processes behind the scenes, you have this huge opportunity to accelerate growth in this company. So they're looking for operationally inefficient but locally owned MSPs, and then the MSPs they're talking to are talking back, basically having this conversation, because they tend to be small, local, individually owned companies that don't have the resources, the wherewithal, the money to build their own sort of AI stack, their own AI lab, like some of the big private equity funded roll-ups are doing right now. So they know that they want to get in on what AI is doing in managed services. It's very difficult to do it on their own. And so here's an opportunity to sell, say, a little over 50%. I mean, the percentages vary, but you don't necessarily sell the whole thing into Titan or Shield. Still retain some ownership, still retain your brand and some control over how you do business, but take advantage of leading edge, state of the art AI technology that is developed in-house from the ground up. So there are tons of tools that, as an MSP, you can buy and apply to your business right now. What Titan and Shield are doing is building their own AI with assistance from people who have built some of the biggest named AI, models and solutions in the market right now, and they're creating it specifically for the workflows that their acquired MSPs are using to support customers. So it is an airtight fit between what the AI stack can do and how the MSP runs its business, and the MSP has direct access to the company that created. It's not like a support call or so on. It's like you are part of the business that created the stack, which means you have influence over how the stack evolves. You also have frontline access to information about how best to apply it. So it's a very different and interesting model. It's a different and interesting opportunity to consider for MSPs right now.
Now, you brought it up, and thank you for going there, because it was kind of where my head was at and where I wanted to discuss. By the way, listeners, if you're watching and you have questions for us, we'd love to hear them, because we're going to get into some of the meat of this, but I know you might have questions, thoughts, and comments. Throw them in the chat, and we'll discuss them. Now, Rich, one of the things that really interests me, you brought up Thrive here, which of course controls Shield Technology Partners. Notably, I think we both noticed this, OpenAI has taken a direct stake in Thrive. So, and OpenAI has positioned the partnership designed to, as they say, showcase how AI can transform business operations. Here in IT services, Thrive also owns a accounting business. So you can actually see from OpenAI's perspective, they want to experiment in two different businesses. And OpenAI has come out and said specifically that engineers will be working directly within these companies companies. I've been really thinking about this as like that is a direct attempt at vertical integration in this space. What's your take on their kind of move here? Are you expecting more of this? Do you think they're flirting with one? Do you have a sense of their direction with this investment?
So you can take them at their word, right? If you look at the blog post OpenAI published a couple of days ago announcing this, they used words like demonstrate and model a lot. We
Right.
want to show what's possible when you take our state of the art AI and apply it to these services businesses. And they did specifically call out accounting and IT. And the reason it's not just OpenAI, it's not just Thrive. General Catalyst, same kind of
Mm-hmm.
industry interest. The idea basically is these are companies with high volume, structured, rule bound workflows. AI right now, this is changing over time, but right now AI is very good at taking help desk work because of all the characteristics I just named there and accelerating that. And so they see an opportunity in those industries right there. From the standpoint of a Thrive, what could be better than to have not only the Silicon Valley AI engineers who we already have working with us, but some of the folks who are directly attached to the underlying large language models cooperating with us, informing us, helping us get even better at developing the stack that we have. Now, does OpenAI, specifically want to be in the services business itself in a big way from a long-term perspective? I'm not sure, but I've got to believe they're at least intrigued. I mean, part of the investment thesis here, if you believe in the power of AI software to make MSPs more efficient, one thing you can do, and we've already seen for years now, we've seen companies create products like this. You can create a product that you sell to the MSP, and then the MSP deploys that and customizes it and adapts it. What's really interesting and different about Titan and Shield is their thesis essentially is in order to really get full value, maximum value out of that AI software, it's not enough to sell it to the MSP and kind of train the MSP to use it. You actually kind of need to own the MSP. When I first started researching Shield and Titan, I sort of thought of them as MSP Rollups, like others we've been talking and writing about for a while, that happen to have especially sophisticated AI labs or developers in-house. And it took me a while to realize these are actually AI software companies that have their own in-house services arm. They are buying MSPs because they really feel like the only way to make sure that the sort of tip of the spear, the service provider who is delivering AI-enabled services to the customer is doing that in the most efficient, most effective, highest profit way possible, is to actually own that company. And if you think about it a little bit, and you have enough vendor experience in your background to relate to this, Dave, I'll just randomly pick ConnectWise. If
Sure.
ConnectWise comes up, let's say tomorrow morning with some amazing new AI feature, right? They've got to go out, they've got to make their MSP partners aware that this thing exists. They've got to convince the MSPs to implement and use this feature. They have to help them deploy it. They have to train them to use it. And then, more times than not, they have to sit back and watch as their MSP partners either misuse the feature or don't take full advantage of it. Um, and then they've got to go in and try to rectify that. At Shield and Titan, they just roll it out like a
Right.
like a corporate IT department, right? And there's no negotiating, basically. And of course, the companies that they're rolling it out to are invested in Shield or Titan. They have a state, they have every motivation to want whatever is new from Shield or Titan and to use it. It's not like they're just following orders. But that connection there is absolutely seamless. And you can understand how that's a huge part of the investment thesis
Mhm.
behind what Titan and Shield are doing. And you can understand how OpenAI might feel like, I wonder if that's the way things are going to go in managed services. And maybe it makes sense for us to be a part of that and see what happens if we're part of that equation. Does the AI get that much better? And do these companies grow that much faster such that this turns out to be a great enterprise opportunity for us?
Well, I mean, so much of this is fascinating. And there's so many pieces of this that could really work out for them. Because if you believe the basic idea that some of this AI intelligence, and I'm kind of intentionally being a little broad there, can start eating into traditional level one type work, from a services delivery perspective, can really accelerate the delivery, can get much more density for, like a per endpoint to technician, relationship. There is really an argument to be made that you need size and scale to do it well, both from the data perspective, both from the number of endpoints that you want to see, the data sets you want to have to deploy across this, and the ability to then leverage that information to deploy it across customers to get your either chatbot or interface or agentic processing, whatever buzzword we want to attach to it. But if you're thinking about it just from the perspective of great automation, size and scale matters here. And again, that if I think about it as a vertically integrated solution here, right, the same way that a retailer might want to have all the way out to selling it to the end customer, this makes a lot of sense to me. And I'm looking at it in kind of two competitive realms. First, they are direct competitors. And I want to think about it in two different ways. First off, you've got a lot of the private equity kind of traditional larger MSPs. We've been having conversations recently about the billion-dollar MSP that's out there. If we take some of the big players that we've been talking about, those that have been swept up, say, by Evergreen or New Charter or some of those. Okay, well, that's a completely different model, and they're kind of competing with one another. And then, by the way, we've got the broad swath of regional MSPs that also now have two fronts that they may be competing with. A larger private equity style roll up, as well as this new version where it's integrated software stack. Do you have a sense of the the landscape of percentages, proportions? Have we got a sense of how widespread this are? How do we measure this competitive landscape?
Well, for right now, there are precisely two of these VC-funded AI-forward kinds of MSP
Right,
rollups out there. So, I mean, uh, but there are going to be more, right? I mean,
right.
exactly like you were saying, you start thinking about how the model works and the logic behind it and the advantages of size and scale. I don't think this stops here, basically. So over time, you'll see a mix of the familiar private equity kinds of roll-ups and more of these VC funded kind of roll-ups as well. And I think you're absolutely right. If you're an MSP who is not a part of either community, if that's the right word, either the private equity funded ones or the VC funded ones, you really have to ask yourself, am I going to be at over time an increasingly great competitive disadvantage? We all understand the merits of the customer service and the relationships that these smaller independently owned MSPs have. But is that going to be enough for a lot of MSPs to kind of go it alone, basically, when they now have two different kinds of competition, heavily underwritten, funded competition out there that are particularly good at AI?
And I think that there's also a subtlety to something you just said. We're aware of precisely two. That doesn't mean there are only two, right? Because guys like you and I who are treated as press and media, you as a proper journalist, and me faking one on TV, we're only aware of the publicly available information. We're not available of anything like stealth organizations or deals that haven't been done publicly. Do you get a sense of how significant this kind of investment will be? Are there other providers you're hearing about or getting a sense of investments that are to come in this space?
Not yet, not
Not
yet.
yet.
But like I said, 100% expecting. It's a matter of time. I think it's a when, not an if.
So I think we need to then put this also in the larger conversation about the AI bubble. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time here as well, because when I hear exactly the conversation we just have been having, I look and go like, okay, that makes perfect sense, right? And this is clearly where some of the money is going, and presumably if this stuff all builds out, then it makes a ton of sense. But the moment you layer somebody like OpenAI into this, I have to immediately go, okay, wait a second, there's a whole bunch of circular money going on here. Right? Like OpenAI putting money into Thrive turning around giving it back to OpenAI. Like that's just a piece of a lot of the circular money that we're starting to see. Some analysts are starting to draw that parallel to the .com bubble, worrying that some of the commitments and spending are outpacing any kind of levels of revenue. But unlike the .com bubble, we're seeing already elements of this where we are seeing productivity gains. And I know if we're picking on particular players, Google is funding this through their search money. This is actually money that they have to do this. How much do you think this conversation about AI being a bubble is relevant to the solution provider market? Like, is this something that they need to think about a lot, a little, not at all? Do you have a sense of that?
So I would say a little. I would say, I
Okay.
mean, you need to be thinking about it, but in a sense, you need to be thinking about it almost exactly the way and to the extent that any business owner needs to be thinking about it, right? I mean, there is just a crazy, sometimes really hard to rationalize amount of money being put into AI data center infrastructure right now. And it's hard to imagine all of those investments paying off. Some of them, I think absolutely, but there are going to be some people placing huge, multiple $100 billion bets who are going to wind up on the losing end of the equation here. And so, I mean, there will ultimately be, there is I think, a bit of a bubble inflating. It will ultimately pop at some point. And when that happens, the last time I looked, and this was really just a few days ago, I believe the Magnificent Seven, and they're not all AI companies, but most
Sure.
of them are exposed to AI. I think 40% of the S&P 500's valuation as of a few days ago was Mag 7 companies. So, NVIDIA reported last Wednesday the entire planet was watching this. They had a great quarter. Someday they're going to have a really good quarter that's going to come in below expectations, and you're going to see a giant market sell-off. And it could, or yeah, it might or might not kind of put us into a recession. To the degree that you have your 401k money in an index fund that's invested in the S&P 500, and the S&P 500 sells off 25% or more because of this bubble popping. It's like, people are going to look at their statement at the end of the month and think, I'm a lot less wealthy than I used to be. They're going to cut back on spending. Next thing you know, you're in a recession. If you're an MSP, that's going to ripple out to you in terms of where your customers spend, how much they spend, how you can kind of deliver value to them, and so on. And to the extent that some of the AI companies that your favorite vendors rely on are affected by this kind of a thing, then that could affect you a little bit too in terms of the reliability and the R&D advancements of those technologies. But I don't think any of that, so I mean, there are definitely some things to be mindful of. It would be a problem for MSPs
Right.
if and when the bubble bursts. But none of that changes anything that we were talking about before in terms of the AI slash services opportunity for SMBs out from a longer term perspective. It's like which models and
Mhm.
which underlying technologies are enabling these venture capital funded AI native startups and so on. That will change. But that services opportunity is still out there. That 950 billion-dollar managed services spend globally by 2030, according to Omdia. That's still going to be out there. So, as the folks at Omdia, as Jay McBain, who I'm sure has been on the show before,
Mhm.
told me just a few weeks ago, there really is still not a better place in IT right now to be than in the managed services realm, because the crazy investments are being made on the infrastructure side. That's not affecting you. They're perfecting the infrastructure and the foundation technologies that are going to enable you, and you are going to be right where you need to be, right when you need to be there, to take complete advantage of this AI services and solutions opportunity within the SMB space.
I think we're very much aligned on that. I'll observe for listeners too. There's other things you need to look at, particularly when you hear these announcements. A lot of times they are commitments, not actual, not actual money, which is important to do. Note that data center builds take anywhere from 2 to 5 years to do. So they talk about new capacity. That's not instant capacity. That's actual physical shovels in grounds. And until we see that actually happening, and we have to track the actual data center build physically to know where that's at. A lot of this is speculation. And my favorite stat lately is people were calling the AI bubble, or sorry, the dot-com bubble was being called 2 years before it actually popped. Now, does that mean it's 2 years now? We have no idea. But we also know that people start talking about a bubble oftentimes before it actually happens. Rich, I want to get a little bit of a tactical take on it. Did you catch the Mazzanati announcement about them building out their own e-bot as well, using Microsoft's Copilot Studio to do this development themselves? Do you have a sense of how effective that will be for smaller MSPs that are thinking about rolling their own? And do you think we're going to see more of that?
So first of all, I will say that I did learn about what Carl Mazzanti's business is doing, that eBot service, and I learned of that courtesy of the Business of Tech podcast. I had not come across it myself, but you found it and alerted me to it. Mazzanti is not a small
Yeah.
company, and so this kind of gets back to what we were talking about before. If you have that kind of scale and those kind of resources, you can create that kind of tool. And we're already seeing some of these larger, usually private equity funded roll-ups, develop and roll out and automate around homegrown native solutions, and in some cases making some of this technology directly available to their SMB end users to make working with the company easier and efficient. So, I mean, it's a very effective strategy and technique for an MSP. The question is just what percentage of MSPs out there right now have the ability to create their own equivalent of an Mazzanti eBot.
Yeah, and I think that's almost an interesting question to do. That is because our listeners are going to need to tackle that. But thank you for that. I think this is one of the reasons why we collaborate and enjoy working together so often, Rich. Is we're both keeping an eye on stuff, and we know this is a super large space, and so we have to throw ideas back and forth in order to make sure that we're keeping an eye on everything. Because if we did it alone, it certainly wouldn't be everything. If people are interested in following your work, learning more, what's the best way for them to do so?
Well, you will find Channelholic, the Channelholic website at www.channelholic.news. And you are also welcome and encouraged to reach out to me directly. I'm on LinkedIn, and Channelholic is on LinkedIn, but you can also email me, rich@channelholic.com.
Well, Rich, I'm a big fan of your work. Always love having you on the show. Thanks again for joining me. We're going to do this again, I know, in the new year.
Awesome. I always love being here.
Well, likewise. Now, for listeners, I want to tease an interview that's dropping out on this weekend. Chris Radich from UiPath joined me for a conversation on the evolution from traditional RPA to agentic automation. We highlighted its potential to streamline end-to-end business processes and enhance operational efficiency. He discussed with me that critical importance of data and process discipline in successfully implementing AI-driven solutions. Here's a preview of that interview. Now, I'm curious, when we're talking about all this outcome stuff, and we got to measure that, I want to get to the measurements in a second, but I would guess, particularly with the themes and some of the projects that you've already rolled out, you're probably starting to see the pattern of the kinds of projects that end up the most successful. Can you give me a little bit of a sense of the kinds of projects that are actually turning out to be the most successful? What are the traits that you're seeing in common?
I have some principles I use.
Okay.
And one of the principles I use is go to your document-centric business processes. So like in the government space, and we've done time studies on this, 35% of a government employee's time is handling and processing documents. Not a surprise. It's you have benefits applications such as a tax return, a Medicaid recipient, or you have back office processes where you're doing audits, you're processing payments. So I always advise find a mission critical document with significantly high volume, because when you find that document, you're going to find the largest bottlenecks in terms of manual work, possibly even waste in the organization. So those projects always do well. And what you're going to do is you're going to effectively what we call a document understanding model. You're going to build a document understanding model, which is a custom machine learning model that's going to extract information from that document with computer vision and route it through your organization. You could never do this in an automated manner prior to this technology being available. Even OCR and scanning that a lot of the MSPs used to use, the document would still be locked up and would require manual processing. So all these MSPs, what did they need? A lot of people. And it's like thousands of people, armies of low-cost labor. It wasn't reliable. It was expensive. The margins were low. So when you bring in intelligent document processing, that is just a massive advantage for an MSP. And most of the MSP programs that I've seen working more in the business process outsourcing space, they're processing documents. They're either archiving it or actually processing applications. So that is just a core principle. I think the second principle is go for a process where you're touching a lot of source systems that are a mixture of both legacy and modern. Because it's very clear the old method of we're going to just replace the system with the Taj Mahal. We're going to spend hundreds of millions. A systems integrator in this case is going to build this for us and it's going to be great. 10 years go by, the legacy system is still running. You actually might have put a veneer on top, but your end users are still using that old system. So you want to look for those scenarios because that's where you need orchestration of the business process. And it's just a whole different modernization pattern. And one area we do really well is mainframes. For example, you're not going to have APIs into every system where you're just going to fix it with an API first architecture. That works for Netflix. It works for Amazon. It doesn't work for most organizations, most government agencies.
There's a lot we can learn from that discussion in terms of what's applicable in our space, particularly if you think about the conversation I just had with Rich and a lot of the risks at the low end of the infrastructure market. What can you do to be more valuable to your customers? It's in that document layer. Business of Tech Plus subscribers get interviews early in the dynamic ad-free feed. It's a benefit of supporting the show. Visit businessof.tech/plus to sign up and get early access. The interview that you just heard will be released for everyone on the weekend. Thanks to ABC Solutions, a Business of Tech Plus supporting vendor. ABC Solutions specializes exclusively in accounting, supporting managed service providers and IT firms. Check them out at abcsolvesit.com. Our live stream support is provided by Rhythms, delivering 5G connectivity solutions for MSPs. Reliable internet access for everyone. Visit rythmz.com for more information. And vendors, you too can get your name mentioned on the live show. It's part of our vendor support level for Business of Tech Plus subscribers. Now, if you as a listener would like to support the show and get even more from the Business of Tech, check out our membership options at businessof.tech/plus. There's a free tier with access to daily stories and transcripts, insider access for bonus analysis and early access to the interviews, and the leadership tier with exclusive vendor briefings, data reports, and behind-the-scenes insights into the channel. Every membership directly supports independent reporting and helps me continue bringing you research-driven coverage of the IT services industry. Again, that's businessof.tech/plus. If you have a question or are listening to the recording, send it in at question@mspradio.com or put it in the comments on YouTube. Thanks for joining me for the Business of Tech Lounge, and I will see you next time.
part of the MSP Radio Network.